The rain in New York City has a way of finding everyone, regardless of who they are. On this particular evening, the sky was a deep, bruised gray, pouring buckets of water onto the busy streets. Taxis splashed through puddles, and people rushed with umbrellas, their heads down, trying to get somewhere dry. In the middle of all this chaos walked Keanu Reeves. He wasn't walking the red carpet, and there were no cameras flashing. He was just a man trying to get out of the rain. Keanu looked tired, the kind of tired that goes deep into your bones. He was dressed in his usual simple style, a worn-out leather jacket that had seen better days, a pair of dark jeans, and heavy boots that looked like they had walked 1,000 miles. His hair was messy from the wind and the rain. To anyone passing by, he looked like a regular guy, maybe someone who worked construction or rode a motorcycle. He didn't look like a movie star, and he certainly didn't look like he had millions of dollars in the bank. That was exactly how he liked it. He valued his privacy and his ability to blend into the crowd, moving through the world without needing everyone to stop and stare. He turned a corner and saw it ahead of him. It was one of those hotels that screams money before you even step inside. The entrance was grand, with tall glass doors and a bright golden glow spilling out onto the wet sidewalk. A long red carpet was laid out, leading to the doors, guarded by men in sharp uniforms with gold buttons. It looked like a warm, safe haven away from the cold storm. Keanu just wanted a bed. He didn't want a fuss or a VIP suite, he just wanted a place to rest his head for the night. He adjusted his bag on his shoulder and headed toward the light. As he approached the entrance, the vibe shifted immediately. The doorman stood under the awning, staying dry while watching the street traffic. He looked like a man who was used to judging people quickly, deciding who belonged and who didn't. When Keanu stepped onto the red carpet, water dripping from his jacket and his bag, the doorman didn't rush to open the door. Instead, he looked Keanu up and down. It was a fast, sharp look, a scan of the clothes, the messy hair, and the unpolished boots. There was no recognition in his eyes, only a look of mild annoyance that this wet, scruffy man was coming toward the entrance. Keanu reached for the door handle himself, pushing the heavy glass open. The hotel lobby was beautiful, in a cold and expensive way. The floor was polished marble that shone like a mirror. There were fresh flowers in huge vases that probably cost more than a car. The air smelled like expensive perfume and old money. It was quiet, except for the soft click of heels and the low murmur of polite conversation. Keanu walked across the marble floor, his boots making a slight squeaking noise that seemed louder than it should have been. He could feel eyes on him. The staff behind the counter glanced over, then quickly looked away, uninterested. He walked up to the reception desk. It was a long, dark piece of wood, and behind it stood a concierge who looked perfectly pressed and utterly bored. The man was checking his nails or adjusting his cufflinks, doing everything he could to avoid acknowledging the customer standing in front of him. Keanu waited a moment, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. He was used to waiting, but this felt different. This felt like he was invisible. Finally, the concierge looked up. He didn't smile. He looked at Keanu's jacket, then at his hair, and finally into his eyes. The look wasn't welcoming. It was the look you give something you found stuck to the bottom of your shoe. Keanu, being the polite man he is, didn't get angry. He just leaned forward a little and spoke softly. "Hi," Keanu said. "I was wondering if you have a room available for the night." The concierge sighed, a long, heavy breath that showed just how much effort this question required. He turned to his computer screen and started typing aggressively, as if the keys had offended him. He clicked the mouse a few times, his face sour. He didn't ask for ID, or a membership number, or how many nights he would be staying. He just typed and stared at the screen, pretending to search. "Name," the concierge asked, not even looking up. "Reeves," Keanu answered simply. The man paused, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. He typed the name in, squinting at the screen. For a second, there was a flicker of something on his face, maybe curiosity, maybe confusion, but it vanished instantly, replaced by a smirk. Clearly, the name didn't ring a bell in his world, or maybe he just didn't care. To him, this was just another person trying to get a room they probably couldn't afford. The concierge turned back to Keanu, his expression flat and dismissive. "I'm sorry," he said, but he didn't sound sorry at all. "We are fully booked. No rooms available." It was a lie. Keanu could see it in the way the man said it. The lobby was nearly empty. There were no bellhops running around with luggage. The key rack behind the desk was full of hooks that weren't being used. The hotel wasn't full, the man just decided that Keanu wasn't the right kind of guest. He saw the worn jacket and the boots, and he decided that Keanu didn't belong in his beautiful, expensive lobby. It was a clear, unspoken message: "You aren't good enough for us." Most people in Keanu's position would have pulled out a credit card, or raised their voice, or pointed to a movie poster. They would have demanded to speak to a manager and made a scene until the concierge was groveling for forgiveness. But Keanu didn't do any of that. He just stood there, taking it in. He felt a quiet sting in his chest. It wasn't about the room, it was about the disrespect. It was about the fact that a fellow human being looked at him and decided he was worthless based on what he was wearing. He looked at the concierge for a long second, his face calm and unreadable. He didn't argue. He didn't get angry. He realized that arguing with someone who had already made up their mind about him was a waste of time. If they didn't have the decency to treat him with basic respect, he didn't want to give them his money anyway. "Okay," Keanu said softly. He nodded his head once, a polite gesture to the man who had just humiliated him. "No problem. Thanks anyway." He turned around and walked back across the marble floor, the squeak of his boots echoing in the silence. The doorman was still standing by the glass doors, watching him leave with a satisfied look on his face, as if he had protected the hotel from a threat. Keanu pushed the door open and stepped back out into the cold New York rain. The wind hit his face instantly, colder than before. He pulled his collar up around his neck and looked up at the hotel sign one last time. It was bright and glowing, promising luxury and comfort, but he knew now that it was all fake. The luxury on the inside was just a mask for the ugliness on the outside. Keanu Reeves didn't go to a different hotel that night. He walked away from that street, disappearing into the shadows of the city, alone with his thoughts. The humiliation could have made him bitter. It could have made him want to buy the hotel just to fire the staff. But as he walked through the rain, something else was happening inside him. The experience was settling into his mind, mixing with his own memories of loss and kindness. He didn't know it yet, but this small, painful moment was the spark. It was the beginning of a change in how he saw the world, and more importantly, how he wanted to shape it. He realized that true wealth wasn't about gold doors or marble floors, it was about how you treat people when you think no one is watching. And he was about to show the world exactly what that meant. The rain kept falling, turning the city streets into a maze of reflecting lights and puddles. Keanu walked with his head down, the water soaking through his jacket and chilling his skin. He didn't run. He just walked at a steady pace, letting the cold wash over him. A few blocks away from the Grand Hotel with its golden lights, the neighborhood changed. The buildings became shorter, the streets darker, and the glamour faded away. He found a small motel with a flickering neon sign buzzing in the window. It wasn't fancy. The carpet in the lobby was stained, and the air smelled like old disinfectant and cooked food, but it was warm, and the door was open. Keanu walked up to the counter. The man working there looked tired, his eyes heavy from a long shift. He was wearing a faded t-shirt and looked up with a neutral expression. When he saw Keanu dripping wet on his carpet, he didn't look at him with judgment. He didn't scan his clothes to guess how much money he had. He just saw a person who needed help. "Tough night out there, huh?" the clerk said, his voice raspy but kind. "Yeah," Keanu replied, shaking the water from his hair. "Really coming down?" The clerk nodded sympathetically and slid a key across the counter. "Room 204. It's not the Ritz, but the bed is dry, and the heat works. That counts for something on a night like this." Keanu took the key. "Thanks. That really does count." He went up to the room. It was small. The walls were thin, and he could hear the low hum of traffic outside and a television playing in the next room. There were no fresh flowers, no marble floors, and no bowing staff. But as he sat on the edge of the bed and took off his wet boots, he felt something he hadn't felt in the lobby of that luxury hotel. He felt peace. He sat there for a long time, staring at the wall, thinking about what had just happened. The humiliation wasn't a sharp pain anymore, it had turned into a heavy, dull ache in his chest. He replayed the scene in his mind. The way the concierge looked at him. The sneer hidden behind a polite mask. The lie about the rooms being full. It wasn't just that they wouldn't let him in. It was the why. They decided he wasn't worth their time. They decided that because his jacket was old and his boots were muddy, he didn't deserve to sit on their furniture. Keanu knew irony better than most people. He was one of the most famous actors in the world. He had millions of dollars in the bank. He could have bought that hotel without blinking an eye. If he had pulled out a black credit card or mentioned his name, the entire energy of that room would have shifted in a second. That clerk would have been falling over himself to apologize. The manager would have come out. They would have offered him the best suite for free. But that was exactly the problem. Why should he have to prove his value with a piece of plastic or a famous name? Why wasn't he deserving of respect just because he was a human being standing there? He thought about his life. He had spent decades traveling between these two worlds. There was the Hollywood world, where everything is shiny and fake, where people smile because they want something from you. And then there was the real world, the world he tried to live in. The world of subway rides, diners, and walking alone on the street. He preferred the real world. It felt honest. But tonight, the real world had slapped him in the face. The judgment at the hotel was the starkest reminder that people put you in boxes the moment they see you. Keanu lay back on the stiff motel pillow, looking up at the water stains on the ceiling. He thought about the people who didn't have his escape hatch. He thought about the guy who works 2 jobs, the single mother, the artist who struggles to pay rent. What happens when they walk up to that hotel counter? What happens when they are told they aren't good enough? They don't have a massive bank account to hide behind. They just have to take the hit. They have to walk out into the rain, feeling small and worthless, believing that lie. That thought made him angrier than his own rejection. It made him feel a fire in his gut. He realized that the luxury industry, the high-end world of velvet ropes and guest lists, was built on making people feel excluded. They sold the idea that you are special only if you can pay for it. They sold a feeling of superiority to the rich and a feeling of shame to everyone else. It was a toxic game, and Keanu wanted no part of it. He realized then that he didn't want to beat them at their own game. He didn't want to become the richest man at the table just to show them. He wanted to flip the table over. He wanted to create something that was the exact opposite of that hotel. The world has enough places that celebrate money. It has enough buildings made of gold and glass that treat people like numbers. What the world needed was a place that celebrated people. A place where the guy in the muddy boots was treated exactly the same as the guy in the tailored suit. A place where the art on the wall mattered more than the label on your shirt. Keanu turned off the lamp, plunging the room into darkness, except for the glow of the street lights outside. The rain was still beating against the window, but it didn't sound cold anymore. It sounded like a rhythm, a beat of change. He drifted to sleep with a heavy mind, but a clear purpose. The humiliation at the hotel could have made him bitter. It could have made him hate the industry he worked in. But instead, it clarified his vision. He saw the gap between the rich and the poor, the important and the invisible, and he decided he wanted to bridge it. Not with charity, but with dignity. That night in the cheap motel, Keanu Reeves wasn't just a movie star sleeping on a cheap mattress. He was a man realizing his next mission. He wasn't going to fight for a room in a hotel that didn't want him. He was going to build his own doors. And when he built them, they would be wide open for everyone. The rejection was just the beginning. The change was coming. The morning after the rainy night at the motel, the sun came out over New York City, but the feeling in Keanu's heart hadn't quite dried up yet. He went to work, as he always did, putting on costumes and reciting lines for the cameras. But something was different. On the outside, he was the same professional actor everyone knew, hitting his marks and saying his words perfectly. But on the inside, he was turning the incident over and over in his mind like a stone in a pocket. The memory of that hotel lobby wouldn't leave him. It wasn't because he was hurt by the rejection, he was a big boy, and he could handle a bit of rudeness. It bothered him because he knew that for every person like him, who can walk away and find a warm bed somewhere else, there are thousands of people who can't. Over the next few years, Keanu started to notice this invisible wall everywhere he went. He went to fancy Hollywood parties in big mansions in the hills. He walked into rooms filled with beautiful people drinking expensive champagne, wearing jewelry that cost more than houses. And yet, he often felt a chill in these rooms that was colder than the New York rain. He saw people looking at each other, measuring each other up, deciding who was important and who was just background noise. It was the same look the concierge gave him. It was a look that said, "You don't belong here unless you can pay for it." He realized that the world of luxury had lost its way. True luxury shouldn't be about keeping people out. It shouldn't be about feeling better than someone else. Real luxury, the kind that actually matters, is about comfort, connection, and peace of mind. It's about a place where you can put down your bags and just be yourself without worrying about being judged. Keanu decided that he didn't want to just complain about it. He didn't want to just be a grumpy actor telling stories about how mean the world is. He wanted to do something. He wanted to build an alternative. This desire led him to seek out people who felt the same way he did. He didn't want business partners who just wanted to make money, he wanted artists and dreamers who understood the human soul. Through a mutual friend, he was introduced to an artist named Alexandra Grant. She was a woman with a kind face and a sharp mind, someone who didn't care about fame or gossip. She cared about words and colors and how people communicate with each other. When they met, it wasn't like a typical Hollywood meeting. They didn't talk about movie deals or box office numbers. They sat down and talked about books. They talked about philosophy. They talked about how hard it is to find a quiet place in a noisy city. Keanu found himself opening up to her in a way he hadn't with many people. He told her about the hotel. He told her about the way he felt walking through the rain, and how the fancy lights felt fake compared to the honesty of the street. Alexandra listened. She didn't just sympathize, she understood. She had felt that same exclusion in the art world, where galleries often feel like museums for the rich instead of places for the people. She told him that art and books should be like bridges, not walls. They should bring people together, not separate them based on how much money they have in their wallets. Sitting in a small coffee shop, sketching ideas on napkins, the vision started to take shape. They didn't want to open a hotel to compete with the one that had humiliated him. That would be too easy, and honestly, a bit boring. Instead, they wanted to create a sanctuary. They talked about opening a small bookshop and publishing house. It sounded simple, almost too simple, but to them, it was revolutionary. They imagined a space that looked nothing like the marble lobby from the Night of the Rain. They wanted wooden floors, comfortable chairs that you could sink into, and shelves filled with books that made you think. They wanted a place where a tired construction worker could come in and sit down next to a famous actor, and for an hour, they would just be two people enjoying a good story. Keanu felt a spark of excitement he hadn't felt in a long time. This was it. This was the answer to the concierge's sneer. The best way to fight back against a world that values money over people isn't to yell at it. It's to build something better right next door. It's to show the world that kindness and openness are more valuable than gold bars and red carpets. They spent months planning. They looked at old buildings in Los Angeles, walking through dusty warehouses and empty storefronts. Keanu didn't send his assistants to do the work. He was there, walking the floors, measuring the walls, imagining where the reading lamps would go. He treated this project with the same seriousness as $100 million movie production because, in a way, it was more important. This wasn't a movie, this was real life. During this time, he also started a private venture called Arch Motorcycle, building custom machines with his friend Gard Hollinger. This was another way of taking control. Instead of just driving cars that other people made, or staying in hotels that other people designed, he was building things with his own hands. He was creating quality from the ground up. Every bolt, every weld, every piece of leather on the bike was chosen with care. It was the opposite of the cold, mass-produced luxury he had encountered in New York. But the bookshop, which they would call ex-artists' books, was the heart of the plan. It was going to be a social sculpture, a place that felt like a living room. Keanu poured his energy into making sure the vibe was right. He didn't want security guards at the door checking IDs. He wanted the door to be open. He wanted the staff to be people who loved books, not people who looked down on customers. As they got closer to opening day, the excitement grew. Keanu knew that people would expect him to do something flashy. They might expect him to open a nightclub or a high-end restaurant. But he didn't care about expectations. He remembered the feeling of standing in the rain, being told he wasn't good enough. He remembered the loneliness of that moment. He realized then that he wasn't just building a shop. He was building the antidote to his humiliation. He was taking the pain of that night and turning it into something warm and welcoming. He was changing the narrative of his own life. He was no longer the guy who got kicked out of the hotel, he was the guy who built a better place for everyone else. The partnership with Alexandra gave him the strength to do it. It was a collaboration based on shared values, something rare in a world built on transactions. They were a team, ready to challenge the status quo. They were ready to show the world that you don't need a velvet rope to make something special. They were ready to open the doors and let the light in, proving that the most exclusive club in the world is the one that lets everyone in. The change was happening, brick by brick, book by book. In the heart of Los Angeles, away from the chaotic noise of the movie studios and the flashing cameras of the red carpets, a quiet transformation was taking place. Keanu Reeves and his partner, Alexandra, didn't want to create another fortress for the wealthy. They didn't want to build a tower with a gatekeeper deciding who was smart enough or rich enough to enter. Instead, they found a modest building in East Hollywood and set to work on something much more radical, a place dedicated to the love of books and art, open to absolutely everyone. They called it Ex-Artists Books. To the outside world, it might have looked like just a small shop, a simple building with a glass front and a sign above the door. But for Keanu, it was the physical answer to that cold night in New York. It was the direct opposite of the hotel that had turned him away. Where the hotel had marble floors that echoed with silence, this place would have wood that felt warm under your feet. Where the hotel had high ceilings meant to make you feel small, this space was designed to feel like a cozy living room where you could stretch out and think. Keanu didn't just write a check and walk away. He was there, getting his hands dirty. He wasn't acting like a boss giving orders, he was working like a craftsman. He spent days moving shelves, arranging tables, and discussing the lighting with the kind of intensity he usually reserved for a movie script. He understood something fundamental about space: the way a room is built tells you how to behave in it. A hotel lobby with velvet ropes tells you to stand straight, keep your voice down, and check your wallet. Keanu wanted his shop to tell you to relax, to breathe, and to let your guard down. They filled the space with books, but not just any books. They focused on artist books, beautiful, strange, handmade objects that were works of art in themselves. These were things that you couldn't just download on a tablet. They were physical things that you had to hold, touch, and smell. The scent of ink and paper filled the room. It was a smell that didn't judge you. It didn't care if you were famous or if you were broke. It just invited you to read. When they finally opened the doors, there was no massive press conference. There were no velvet ropes blocking the entrance. There wasn't a guy in a uniform deciding who could come in. The door was simply open. And something miraculous happened. People from all walks of life walked through that open door. A student carrying a heavy backpack came in, looking for a quiet place to study. An elderly man who lived in the neighborhood wandered in, just to see what was new. A tourist who recognized Keanu's name came in, maybe expecting a fancy souvenir shop, but instead found a quiet corner to sit and read. They all sat together. The student, the old man, the tourist, they shared the same tables. They looked at the same art. For the hour they spent inside, nobody was better than anyone else. The luxury in this room wasn't a gold-plated doorknob or a crystal chandelier. The luxury was time. The luxury was peace. The luxury was the freedom to enjoy beauty without being pressured to buy something or be someone you aren't. Keanu would often sit at the counter or walk around the floor. He didn't wear a disguise, but he also didn't make a big deal out of who he was. Sometimes customers would recognize him, and their eyes would go wide with surprise. But instead of acting like a celebrity hiding from his fans, he would smile and ask them what they were reading. He would talk about the art on the walls with genuine excitement. He treated the person buying a $5 bookmark with the same respect and attention as he treated a serious collector buying an expensive art book. This was his new definition of success. He realized that the hotel in New York had failed because it tried to sell an image of exclusivity. They sold the feeling that you were special because you were allowed inside, which means everyone else is not. Keanu wanted to sell the feeling that everyone is special just because they are human beings who appreciate creativity. The shop became a sanctuary. It became a place where the noise of the city seemed to disappear. It was a social sculpture, a living artwork that changed based on who was inside it. If you were having a bad day, you could walk in, and the warm light and the smell of paper would make you feel a little bit better. It was the antidote to the cold, judgmental world of the luxury hotel. Keanu watched this happen with a quiet sense of pride. He saw people connecting. He saw strangers talking to each other about a poem or a painting. He saw community forming in the most organic way possible. He didn't need a giant skyscraper with his name on the top to feel important. He had this small, humble room filled with books. And it was worth more to him than any chain of five-star hotels. He had effectively changed the game. The world told him that to be successful, he had to be exclusive, to be distant, to be unreachable. He proved that true influence comes from being accessible, from being grounded, and from caring about the little details that make a human life pleasant. By stripping away the pretension, by removing the barriers, he created a space that felt more expensive than the Ritz, simply because it felt real. In this shop, nobody was ever turned away for looking scruffy. Nobody was ever lied to about availability. Every book was there for the taking, every chair was free to sit in. Keanu Reeves had taken the humiliation of that rainy night and used it as fuel to build a fire, a warm, welcoming fire that anyone could gather around. He didn't just build a business, he built a reminder to the world that kindness is the ultimate luxury. And the best part was, this was just the beginning. The message was spreading, one reader at a time. Today, if you walk down the streets of Los Angeles or New York, you might just see him. He isn't surrounded by bodyguards who push people out of the way. He doesn't travel in a convoy of black SUVs that block traffic and scream for attention. Most of the time, Keanu Reeves is just Keanu. He might be sitting on a park bench, eating a sandwich, watching the world go by. He might be standing on the subway platform, holding onto the rail, squeezed in between a tired nurse and a student heading home. He gives up his seat for others. He carries his own backpack. He looks people in the eye when they speak to him. This is the silent revolution he started. It didn't happen with a press release or a big announcement. It happened through choices, day after day. The incident at the luxury hotel could have broken his spirit or made him bitter, but instead, it became the foundation of a completely new way of living. He decided that he would never be the kind of person the concierge wanted him to be. He would never play the game of superiority. By refusing to wear the mask of a celebrity who is above everyone else, he changed everything for the people around him. Think about the stories you see on the internet, the ones that go viral because they are so rare and surprising. There is the story of him flying to London to see his sister, only to turn around and fly right back because he had to work, sleeping in the economy seat like anyone else. There are the stories of him buying an ice cream cone and then hanging out outside the shop to eat it, just so he could sign autographs and talk to fans who were passing by. There is the famous video of him giving up his seat on the subway. In every single one of these moments, he is rejecting the velvet rope mentality. He realized a long time ago that true power doesn't come from making people wait for you. True power comes from making people feel seen. When he talks to a fan, he doesn't look over their shoulder for someone more important. He listens. He laughs. He treats a stranger with the same focus and intensity that he brings to a movie role. In a world where famous people often treat their fans like a nuisance, Keanu treats them like neighbors. This philosophy eventually extended beyond his personal life and bled into his work as a filmmaker. He became known in the industry as the guy who would take pay cuts just so a movie could afford to hire better special effects artists or a better supporting cast. He fought for the crew members, the people moving the lights and building the sets, because he knew they were the ones doing the hard work. When the massive success of the John Wick movies came along, he didn't use it to demand a bigger trailer or more money. He used his leverage to help the stunt team, the people who risked their bodies to make him look cool, get the recognition they deserved. He helped form a stunt team union so they could have better insurance and protection. Looking back, it is incredible to see how much impact that one rainy night at the hotel had. If he had just flashed his black card and gotten the room, he would have been just another guest in a fancy hotel. He would have been comfortable, yes, but he wouldn't have learned anything. The rejection was a gift. It forced him to look at the world and decide who he wanted to be within it. The luxury hotel that turned him away, it's still there, probably turning away people today for not looking the part. But it doesn't matter anymore. Keanu won. He didn't win by buying the building and firing the staff. He won by outclassing them in every possible way. He showed the world that you don't need a golden door to be valuable. You don't need marble floors to have dignity. The shop he opened, Artist's Books, still stands as a symbol of this victory. It is a proof of concept. It proves that you can build a successful, beautiful place without being cruel or exclusive. It proves that people are hungry for connection and genuine experiences. But the biggest impact is in the way he lives his life. He has become a role model not because he can fight bad guys in movies, but because he walks through the real world with kindness. When people tell his story now, they don't talk about the money or the fame. They talk about the heart. They talk about a man who lost his father, lost his best friend, lost his child, and still kept his heart open to the world. He had every reason to be angry, to be bitter, to lock himself away in a tower and never come out. But he chose the opposite. He chose to engage. He chose to build a table where everyone can sit, rather than a wall to keep people out. Keanu Reeves changed everything because he refused to change himself for the sake of approval. The hotel wanted him to be something he wasn't. They wanted him to fit their mold of a valuable person. By walking out into the rain, he held onto his own identity. And that identity, grounded in humility and grace, turned out to be more powerful than any blockbuster movie. It is a lesson for all of us. We all face moments where we are judged, maybe not by a concierge at a hotel, but by a boss, a teacher, or a stranger on the internet. We are told we aren't good enough, smart enough, or rich enough. The temptation is to get angry, or to try to change ourselves to fit their standards. But Keanu showed us another way. You don't have to shout to be heard. You don't have to exclude people to feel important. In the end, the man who was humiliated became the most respected figure in Hollywood, not by demanding respect, but by giving it. He changed the definition of what it means to be a star. A star isn't someone who shines from above, looking down on everyone. A star is a source of light and warmth that pulls everyone in. Keanu Reeves is that kind of star. And he proved, without a doubt, that the best way to handle a cold world is to bring your own fire. He walked away from the luxury, but he found something far better, his dignity, and the love of millions who finally felt seen.